Hey you guys, and welcome back to That Disney Girl, and this week we're going to talk about why Disney always smells so good. And the reason for this are the Air Smellitizers that are all over the Disney parks. Now if you don't know what this is, it's basically the reason why when you're going to Disney's PhilharMagic and Be Our Guest comes on, the entire theater starts to smell delicious. Or if you're at Pixar Pier Hotel and it smells like sunscreen. And there are so many other scents to talk about, so let's dive in. So Disney has Air Smellitizers all over their attractions and parks, and these basically look like little speakers, but they're perfectly themed to fit whatever section of the park that they are in. And this is all to cater to what Walt originally called the art of show. So when you're in a Disney park, you can basically see that everything is telling a story, and it's kind of like you're in a movie and everything's unraveling as you go along. Let's take Disneyland for example. Here is a perfect way to explain forced perspective, which is something that Walt really created to try to make you feel like you were in a movie. Or I guess some sort of a really fun fairy tale. So in Disneyland, that's done by making the buildings in Main Street get smaller as they go down the main street, just so that the castle can look a lot larger than it is. All the way to the costuming that you can see in every other land that would never cross paths with another one. I mean, you would never see a Tomorrowland cast member in Adventureland. And then all the way to the smells that complete your sensory experience at Disney. And that's what makes this whole story believable. Even if we look at Mickey's 10 Commandments, they kind of all adhere to this idea of detail and making all that detail go to the story that you're telling. But to tell this story, let's go back to the beginning and find out how smells even really kind of came to be in the art of storytelling. So smells obviously did not start off in parks, but in film. And although Disney wasn't the first company to produce smells during their films, Walt was the first person to think of it. Or at least the first person that I know that thought of it, and this is because in the 1940s, Walt really wanted to include smells in his film Fantasia. Now him and his Imagineers looked into doing this, but unfortunately the cost became too high, so it never came to fruition. But in under a decade later, General Electric created the technology to have scents during a film. And yes, that is the same General Electric that sponsored Carousel of Progress from Inception, so coincidence? Maybe, but I don't know, I like to think not. But in the end, this first round of machinery didn't do too well. The machines were really loud and it was really taking away from your movie experience, and plus the scents weren't releasing on time, so you were getting scents that were kind of delayed or a little bit too early, so it wasn't really contributing to the story but really detracting from it. So as Disney started to see technology surrounding these smelling machines advance, they decided to take another crack at it, and in 1984 Imagineer Bob McCarthy would patent the Smellitizer. Something really interesting about this machine is that it actually works like a piece of artillery, specifically the howitzer, and this was kind of something that looked like a gun combined with a cannon, and the point of this was to shoot shells over a high trajectory. And if we think of the location of most of our Air Smellitizer vents throughout the Disney parks, a lot of them are lower to the ground, so it makes sense that the technology they were kind of taking after was one that was shooting things from a low point to a really high point, except this was shooting something a lot nicer than shells. So when you're walking around Disney, these scents are going to be a way to differentiate you from different lands. It's going to help tell a story, evoke a feeling. It'll definitely bring you back feelings of nostalgia, and it's a great way to sell food. So the way that this scent emitting system works is that it's basically propelling out a scent, but then there's also exhaust that suck that scent right back in, so that you're never being contaminated with two scents or a lingering scent for too long of a time. Disney also tested over 3,000 scents before they started narrowing them down to place them around the parks, so you can see how much detail went into this small aspect of Disney. So now that we know some of the history of these Air Smellitizers, let's talk about some of the most famous ones throughout Disney. So I'm gonna go ahead and start off with my favorite one, and that is the Smellitizer vents that are on Main Street. Now Main Street actually has a few Smellitizer vents and they look somewhat like this, but depending on the location or the shop that you're in front of, it's gonna kind of give you a different scent. But the one thing to note is that all of these scents are kind of going off the same variation of a sweet smell. So just like the music loops that you hear around Main Street, which are kind of variations on a different happy, jolly tune, that's exactly what these Smellitizers are doing. They're variations on a sweet smell that make you really feel at home and welcomed, which is the beginning of your story into this park. And when you get towards the end of Main Street, my favorite Smellitizer vent is there, and that is at the Plaza Ice Cream Parlor. And this is because this one smells like fresh waffle cones, and it makes you want to run in there. Literally, when I'm walking down Main Street, my body shifts towards there. But the reason that I think this specific Smellitizer is one of the most successful that Disney has to offer is because of two things. Not only is the smell really appetizing and indulging, but it is also something that kind of acts like a secret silent cast cast member because it's selling you something without you even knowing it. But this isn't the only smellitizer that does this art of selling throughout Disney. There are smellitizers all around the park before popcorn stands that kind of make you smell popcorn, and then suddenly you really have an urge to buy a box. And if we walk out of Disney and look at most of the deluxe resorts on property, think about it. Doesn't each one have a specific smell that you kind of always remember but can't really quite pin? And that's probably because you're never really looking out for smell, but it definitely does create this whole ambiance and theming that every resort adheres to. I already mentioned the smell of suntan lotion over at Pixar Pier Resort in Disneyland, but in Disney World there are so many resorts that do the same thing. The Polynesian Resort has such an amazing scent. It's one that kind of smells almost like green tea with bamboo and citrusy leaves, a little bit of an aloe smell in there, but it's really nice, refreshing, and it makes you feel like you're on a tropical destination. When you're at the Yacht and Beach Club Resort, it makes you feel like you're in the middle of the ocean. And the Contemporary Resort has an amazing fresh light smell that I can't specifically pin down, so if you know the kind of smell that you get when you go there, definitely let me know in the comments below because I'm really trying to figure that one out. So if we jump back to the parks, not only are these smellitizers in different sections or lands of these parks, but they're also on Disney attractions, but sometimes in a way that's not so extreme and a lot more subtle that really makes you feel like you're in the world of the attraction. For example, a really extreme way of showing the smellitizer in an attraction would be Journey into Imagination with Figment. When you get that skunk smell, that's definitely something that's intentional that the ride is meaning to do to you, but there are other rides that create the scent just to kind of create a new atmosphere for you to go into. One of the most famous smellitizers would be in Pirates of the Caribbean. There's definitely a distinct eerie water smell whenever you go in Pirates of the Caribbean, and that's not because of the actual water that you're in, that's from the smellitizers that are all over the ceilings of the attraction. The Haunted Mansion is another attraction that uses smellitizers. When you're going through, you might feel like it smells a little bit musty and muggy, and that's not because Disney doesn't clean this attraction, that's because they're being piped in for you. Or how about Pandora? I mean, the entire land has a smell, and so does Flight of Passage. And of course, there are so many more smells that we can talk about at Disney, but that would take a lot more time. So please let me know in the comments below what your favorite scents are at Disney. But for now, that is it, so I will see you real soon. Bye, everyone!